Today marks the 10-year anniversary of Cynical Gaming Blog. Now, for those of you who don't read my blog and don't know about it, Cynical Gaming Blog is basically where this all started. This YouTube channel is basically kind of the official Cynical Gaming Blog YouTube channel. I like to think of it that way, because Cynical Gaming Blog is basically where I put everything. It's kind of like the home for all of my content that may not be on YouTube or may be on YouTube. Now, for those of you who have read my blog and not really seen my YouTube channel and wondering why I've been making so many YouTube videos, well, there's a reason for that. A lot of it's because YouTube gives more engagement, and YouTube is still a way of making content, so I still post the YouTube videos on here. But as for written content, well, the reason why I don't really do it as much is because I just don't really think that people want to consume it, if I'm honest. I think it's pretty obvious where I'm going with this. Basically, my blog isn't really that well known. Nobody knows about it, obviously, and people don't really engage with it, which is part of the reason why I do YouTube, because, well, it's to get that engagement so that people leave comments and interact, which I don't really get that on my blog, so it's very hard to know what's going on with that. But I do have a lot more on my blog than I do on YouTube, because some things I don't want to do YouTube videos on. And obviously it all started with my blog, so it all started with written content, and then eventually I kind of branched out onto YouTube and I did some video content, and I did some edited video content, which as you all know, I don't do that anymore, but I still occasionally do written reviews on Cynical Gaming Blog, but that's kind of about it. I don't really do as much anymore on both, really, as I used to, but occasionally I'll still do a written review on Cynical Gaming Blog, just not as often. So you might see some written reviews on my blog that you won't see on my YouTube channel, which I'm sure that a lot of people aren't aware of. And yes, I have quite a few reviews done. I have a total of 54 reviews that are done on the website, and there's only a few reviews that are done on YouTube. There's only 16 reviews on the YouTube side, so there's not really as many. There's 16 out of 54. That's how many more reviews that are on the blog. And the reason why is because, well, YouTube reviews take a lot more effort and work to do, and the blog is a lot easier and I can get a review out quicker because I don't have to do all the editing and stuff. And that's one of the reasons why I did a lot more written reviews than I did video reviews. But I don't do video reviews anymore because of the workload, but occasionally I'll do a written review because it's easy to do. And that's kind of where all of my written content is. So if you want to see reviews and stuff from me, then you definitely want to check out Cynical Gaming Blog, because that's where all the reviews are. Obviously all my videos are going to be posted on there as well. I mean, there are a few that haven't been. I probably should at some point think about doing that, but ultimately that's basically where most of my content is going to be. Now obviously I understand if you're not going to do that. People obviously only want to watch me for my YouTube content. That's understandable. They use YouTube as a hub. They're not going to go to some other site to read reviews. I get it, but it's just something to be aware of if you want to keep up with everything that I do, because not everything I do is on YouTube, and most of my reviews, if you're looking for them, are on my blog, and the YouTube videos, if any, may be in those reviews as well, so you get both the written and the video review for certain reviews. So yeah, the original plan of Cynical Gaming Blog, well, originally it was kind of an idea that somebody gave me when I was writing on the Destructoid community blogs. Someone by the name of Reinhold Hoffman, that's the username he went by on Destructoid, he kind of gave me the idea to set up my own blog, because he was like, well, you might as well have your own space. And I was like, oh, well, how hard is that? And he was like, oh, it's not that hard. All you need to do is just go on WordPress and just do all that. And I'm like, oh, well, I'll do it. And I thought, well, I'm going to call it Cynical Gaming Blog because I'm cynical, you know? I got a lot of heat on Destructoid just simply for my opinions. I think we all know my opinions are not usually well liked at this point, but obviously back then, like, I wasn't really as aware, and I think it made me aware just how controversial I am as a content creator. And yeah, I kind of realized that it was not the right place for me, and then I decided that I would put reviews and content on Cynical Gaming Blog, although I was still doing Destructoid for a while until I stopped eventually, and I have my reasons. I'm not going to go into that again. But yeah, when I started, I put some of the reviews that I did on Destructoid onto Cynical Gaming Blog. Like, for example, my Warcraft 3 review, that was the first review that was published on Cynical Gaming Blog, but it was an old Destructoid, like, community blogs review. Now, there are still a few old reviews from Destructoid that I've managed to salvage using the Wayback Machine, but they're not in good shape, and yeah, they're not good, and they're a bit of a mess, and they're kind of old, you know. Like, I don't think that they hold up as well as the reviews on Cynical Gaming Blog, and I just have them on the blog for archival purposes. They're not on the front page, so technically I've done more than 54 reviews, but I'm not going to count those, you know. But the whole idea was that I was just basically going to showcase the games I love, you know, the games from the 2000s, back when gaming was great, so that people can recognize the greatness of video games, whilst also taking pot shots at modern gaming and its bullshit, which, to be fair, I didn't really do as much as I could have. I mean, a lot of people say, well, you always talk shit about modern gaming. Well, I could be like Jim Sterling, you know, and talk about it all the time and just make an entire channel that is entirely that, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to talk about games that I loved and be positive about games from the 2000s, instead of just being a channel full of negativity, and that's what I tried to do. Obviously, that sort of content didn't do well because people want to listen to me rant and rave, and that's just how it is. People don't want to listen to me talk about games I love, they just don't. That's just how the world is. People tend to go for negativity more. And given the fact that I'm Cynical Gaming Blog, it makes sense that I would deliver that type of content. But I don't want to entirely go that route because it would be exhausting. I don't want to be cynical all the time, but yes, I am cynical most of the time. So the name fits. It's a simple name, it's not really subtle, is it? It's not really, but I just thought, well, I'm just going to stick with it, and that's kind of what I did. And yeah, I basically just started reviewing video games because I was like, fuck it, we're going to just do this, and I just said, let's see how long we can last, let's see how long we can go for. Well, we're 10 years in. And I can safely say things have changed, not so much in the gaming industry other than the fact that it's gotten worse, but in life it's changed, definitely. Like, 10 years has passed and quite a lot has changed. So yeah, but the gaming really hasn't really gotten better, let's put it that way. It's gotten worse, and yeah, that's not good. There are certain things that have gotten a little better with gaming, but not many. It's mostly on a downward spiral, and yeah, like, there's not many big wins for the gaming industry, as we all know, and like everything, it's all nuance, isn't it? But I tend to use a lot of hyperbole in a lot of my content because, well, that gets attention and people love it, and I love doing it, so that's kind of the reason why. But it's a nuanced thing. Like, everybody talks about, you know, retro gaming sucks, modern gaming sucks, you know, it's all nuance, one way or another. But that's the only way you can have a voice on the internet nowadays. I've talked about that before. But the whole idea of it was that I basically just kind of like do things my way, you know, not have to deal with like all the bullshit, like what I can and can't do, and just have a freedom of speech and just be able to say what I want to say without being censored. And the best part about Cynical Gaming Blog is I can basically have an uncensored way of talking, or well, of writing, and I think that's the good thing about Cynical Gaming Blog. It's the fact that I am more uncensored there than I am on YouTube, because YouTube is starting to censor people. It's starting to like get rid of people's voices and shadow ban people, and Cynical gaming blog, well, let's put it this way, WordPress doesn't really give a shit, as long as I don't go too out there with things. Like, they don't give a shit about, like, political bullshit and, like, stuff like that, which, you know, people getting offended all the time. They don't give a shit about all that, and, you know, like, you mainly just, you're not using, it's a little bit different, because even though you are technically using a platform with WordPress, you're not using a shared platform, you know, in the same way. You kind of are, but it's like you're using your own space. Whereas YouTube, you are using YouTube space. It's a complicated thing, but it's similar in a lot of ways, but it's different. Let's put it this way, they haven't taken measures like YouTube has to kind of like screw over creators and stuff, but at the same time, if you're thinking about making it financially viable for, like, basically doing it as a career, think again, because I'll just tell you right now, I make no money on my blog. Just like YouTube, I don't make money on any of it. It's just a way for me to broadcast what I want to say and just say what I want to say, and it's a place where I can just collect everything that I've said in one area. That's the whole point of Cynical Gaming Vlog. So yeah, I think some people have actually gotten the wrong, like, idea and just thought that I actually genuinely did this for a living. I'm like, no, I don't do this for a living. You know, I just do this because it matters to me, and that's why I do it. But yeah, obviously there are other things in my life now that I've taken more priority, so it's not really a big thing now, but it is still important to me from what I've made in the past, because the content I've made in the past is still my legacy, and that's valuable. And to say that I've managed to somewhat keep up with it for 10 years is an achievement, even if I will admit it has been a bit slow in the later years. I will definitely admit that it's been a bit of a struggle in some of the later years to get, like, that 10-year milestone, because yeah, I was burning out. I was definitely burning out for a lot of reasons. I think a lot of it had to do with finding a purpose behind it all, and trying to kind of like understand what it is that I really wanted to do with this blog, and like understanding the value that I'm bringing, and what would I actually bring that is valuable, because obviously reviews are no longer what they once were. People don't tend to look at reviews anymore, they don't tend to consume them, and they're kind of, in a way, dead content. It's kind of weird, because a childhood dream of mine was to be a game reviewer, and then eventually, like, I became a game reviewer, like, but on my own terms, and this is the result. Cynical Gaming Blog is the result of me essentially challenging the norm and just having the freedom to speak my mind. And while it feels great that I've been able to do that, it's kind of like, it's one of those things where it's not really quite as extravagant as I expected it to be, which makes sense, you know, but at the same time, it's just like, you look at the state of the internet now, and everybody's doing this shit. It's not really anything special. There's nothing, but everybody does it, and really, that some put more work in, some people put less work in. I've tried to put a bit of work in, but I know my limits, and I've limited how much workload I put in, because obviously I know what's realistically viable for me to put work in too. And that's kind of how I've measured up the way that I do things, and I just kind of stuck to that formula. I'm not trying to improve on anything, I'm not trying to get better with my content. I'm trying to make content easier to make, pretty much, because I have other things that I'm working on improving in life that are not to do with this. But at the time, yes, there was a time where I was trying to like create a way of making something that would be doable, but that I could put a little bit of work into. Like, how could I make this work? How could I make it work where I can put as much effort that I'm able to, like, be consistent at? And that's kind of what I strove for. So that's why I have a very minimalistic sort of design for my reviews, and why it's very traditional. A lot of that stems from gaming magazines and how they inspired me in a lot of ways. Like, I wasn't inspired by a lot of like like people like AVGN or anything like that. It was all magazine reviews, and I wanted to be that sort of thing. Just instead of like the corruption and bullshit and like the, you know, the professional stuff, I decided to go the opposite way and just basically do what they did, but without all the professional bullshit, and just say what I want to say. And that's kind of the whole agenda of what Cynical Gaming Blog was. So that's kind of why the reviews are the way they are. And yeah, like, I don't really think that there's much value in game reviews nowadays. I'm just going to be honest, guys. I think that it's a form of dead content. I just do. Like, and it's hard for me to admit this because obviously after spending all this time doing all these reviews, it kind of feels like a shame to know just how pointless and worthless they were in the grand scheme of things, and just how nobody cares about them. But that's just life, you know. Sometimes you've got to learn these things and figure it out and realize and pick yourself up and take a different route. And that's kind of what I did when I realized the reality of game reviews and just what they really mean nowadays and just how worthless they are. That made me question a lot of what I was doing, and that's why it was a struggle for the last few years, because of that realization. But I was like, you know, I want to keep going, I want to keep at it, because I'm nearing that 10-year milestone. And that was the whole idea. When I set up Cynical Gaming Blog, I wanted to challenge myself and say, look, let's see how long this lasts. Let's see if I can last 10 years at this stuff, you know? And, well, I went for it. I kind of, like, went after the 10-year milestone, and, well, I achieved it. But it doesn't feel like I achieved it because of those last few years. It felt that I was forcing myself to get to that milestone, but at the same time I realized there's no point, and I kind of slowed down early. So in a way I kind of did, but I kind of didn't. I achieved it, but not in the way I wanted to achieve it. I didn't achieve it on a consistent level to how I was back then, because of having to slow down. Like, I was hoping that I would be able to semi-retire later than when I did, and I semi-retired earlier, which, yeah, at least with YouTube. But with this, even Cynical Gaming Blog, I was slowing down. But over time, things did get a little bit easier when I was finding different methods to do things, but it's just like, it just felt empty. And I think that's the thing, like, it just feels empty to me now, this sort of thing, because it's just like, I just don't think people value it, you know? And it's just like, what is the point anymore? And that's the problem. That's always the problem that I've had in recent years, and it's been difficult to get over that. But ultimately, I don't have any regrets. I think there's a lot of things that have been good about it, and I've still got all this content there. It still exists. It's still part of the legacy I've created, and I can always go back and like look back on all the content I've made, you know? And yeah, I think there's some value in that. I do think there is, but it's personal value, isn't it? And that's kind of how I look at it. That's kind of how I look at my channel and all my content. It's basically my 20s. That's basically what it is. It's my 20s, and it was my 30s when it was starting to be a struggle. You know, when I turned 30, it was like, yeah, I kind of want to move away from this. But at the same time, I want to hit that milestone, and yeah, I kept plugging away at it. But yeah, it represents my 20s when I was younger, when I had a little bit of sort of ambition to do something a little bit different than what I was doing, and actually give myself a purpose besides just playing video games, and yeah, all that. I wanted to do something more with that, and that's kind of why I did it. But I just think that over time, just there's a lot of things, like, I was cynical about video games for the longest time, yes, but I wasn't as cynical about content creation back then, whereas now I kind of am. And I think a lot of it's just the current climate, really. It's just how people are now and how people are wired, and just the way it is. I just don't see content creation and these platforms the same as they were like 10 years ago. Like YouTube 10 years ago was so different. Like, it really was. Like, YouTube, like I don't know, 20 years ago? Like, YouTube 20 years ago, damn. Like, that was a very different beast to what it is today. Like, if you were doing YouTube like 15 years ago, and you were doing reviews, you could probably like get a lot of attention because people were actually wanting to consume reviews back then. But now it's different. The whole feel, like, it's not a fair, like, it's not a fair battlefield anymore. Now it's like everything has been laid out now. You know, companies have put their fingers in their, you know, in everything's pies, you know, in all these big channels' pies. So they've basically laid the groundwork for the commercialization of YouTube content and just the corporatization of YouTube content creation. They've laid that down. Whereas back in the day, like 15 years ago, that thing wasn't a thing. Like 15 years ago, like, corporations didn't really have much control, and YouTube content creators could basically say what they want, and basically, like, they would basically get attention for making reviews that were, you know, early, because people were getting cynical of, like, the mass media outlets like IGN and GameSpot. So they turned to YouTube game reviewers, and obviously YouTube game reviewers would review old classic games, and they'll probably review, like, modern games if they get them. But yeah, then we have all these review codes, and I seriously think, and I get it to some degree, because it makes YouTube content creators equal to, like, the mass media outlets, but at the same time it also creates a divide, because, well, now the problem with review codes is that it's very sketchy, because it means that, like, content creators ultimately, like, are at the mercy of the publishers. You know what I mean? Whereas mass media outlets always were, but that's the problem. Once publishers started doing this whole review code thing, that's when the corruption really set in. Like, when they started doing review codes for YouTube content creators. But I think it set in before that, because back in, like, I think 2005, which I think YouTube didn't start around that point, but, like, early YouTube, you didn't have monetization. People didn't monetize content. They just made it. And, you know, like, if you made reviews and stuff, you weren't getting paid for that. You know, I think monetization is the worst thing to happen to YouTube. I do. I think monetization is the worst thing to happen to content creation in general, because it's created this divide, you know? I don't like the fact that, you know, my content is pushed down the algorithm because somebody's chasing money and is using video content that is ultimately going to get the most out of the algorithm for the biggest payout. You know, that's the problem. The whole algorithm is terrible now on YouTube because of monetization. That's what's fueled it, because people chasing the money are going to take advantage. You know, they're going to find the loopholes and they're going to work their way up the top. So the smaller creators who are actually passionate about it but don't really care about doing it for a living get punished for it. And YouTube's been pushing those smaller creators out slowly but surely over time, and making them want to just ditch the platform entirely, mainly because they found the people that they want. You know, they've got the people that they need. They want to go target celebrities that are going to get all the people. Like, that's what they're trying to do. They're getting all these celebrities to start YouTube channels and pushing them because they've already got known from elsewhere, but they're wanting them to go on the platform. That's what they want. They want celebrities on YouTube, you know? They don't want normal plebs like us. Now, as for blogging, well, that was always kind of the case where it's just like blogging, you just kind of on your own, and, you know, there is no real algorithm in the same sense. You're just dealing with search engines and stuff. That's kind of how it was, but you don't get half as much engagement as YouTube. YouTube used to be like a big place where you really had an opportunity to get engagement. Not anymore. And that's kind of the result of really monetization. I think monetization is the worst thing, because the thing about it is like, I was never even planning on monetizing all this shit. This was all about passion. This was all about loving what I did, you know? I mean, that's just how it is. Like, it's all about doing it because this is what I wanted to do with my life when I was, like, I don't know, a kid. This is my life dream, you know? And I've lived the dream. I've lived the dream as a game reviewer, but it doesn't mean anything. You know, it means nothing because everyone's a game reviewer now. Everyone's a critic. You know, everybody has realized and figured out just how easy things are to do and how everything isn't an exclusive club anymore when the internet has basically provided the ability to do so whilst bypassing all the bullshit of corporate ladder bullshit and all of that lot. Like, it used to be if you reviewed video games, you were paid an hourly rate by a company to do that. You know, and you were employed by these companies, and you'd have to go to a job interview to kind of like make sure that you fit in with the like company's image, and that your boss likes you, you know, and you butter up to the boss and all that shit, like most jobs are, you know what I mean? It used to be a position that had prestige. It isn't now. Now, game reviewers are just, you know, they're either people who have made it big and are struggling to stay relevant, or they are people who are still just doing this as a passion project and nobody cares, you know? And I will definitely say the big YouTube channels, my god, I'm so glad that I'm not in that position, because all these people that got big on YouTube and made it into their career are now struggling because the tables have turned. Now YouTube's getting all these celebrities in, now they're pushing all the other content creators like the plebs away, and then, you know, they're making it harder and they're really struggling. I never had to deal with that because I've never been monetized, so for me it's always been the same thing, but I've just watched YouTube rise and fall since the start, because that's the thing, I was born in the 90s, so I saw the rise and fall of YouTube, because YouTube was basically a 2000s thing. I was brought up in the 2000s and I was born in the 90s, you know, so I saw the rise and fall of YouTube, and anyone who was born in the 90s, you saw the rise and fall of YouTube. You lived to see that. And yeah, like, it's crazy how much it's changed over the years. But everything's changed over the years. So really, I had to find an alternative, like, idea of what I wanted to do with my life. Obviously, I've had like other things that I've done in my life, but the thing is that this was a big dream of mine and it didn't really go anywhere. It just felt like, well, this was more of a thing that it's one of those things of like, it's not really as good as you thought it was going to be, sort of thing. And I think it's not really about the money, like I said. It's more about the pride. I think that's the thing that has to me the most. Like, it's not really about like making money off of this shit, because to be honest, who gives a fuck? Money, you spend them. I mean, obviously, you know, like, you're going to obviously need money to get by in life, but you know, you get a bit of money from YouTube, you spend it, then what do you have? Nothing left, you know? It's just like, what's the point in doing this for the money? But the pride, absolutely, that's what it hit me, because it's just like, what I'm doing doesn't matter anymore. And I think that was the biggest, like, learning curve I've ever had in regards to that kind of, like, well, it's one of the biggest learning curves I've had to go through in my life, in a way. Not the biggest, obviously, but one of them, in terms of, like, my ambitions and stuff. And, yeah, like, it's caused me to change as a person, and it's caused me to rethink a lot of things. So, Cynical Gaming Blog has been a big journey for me in that regard. You know, it's helped me essentially realize that ultimately my childhood dreams were kind of stupid, and I probably shouldn't have, like, had that as a dream in retrospect, because it wasn't practical. But because of the realization of that, I managed to find other things in life that I now look towards as an interest, and I focus on that now instead of this. And I look back at Cynical Gaming Blog as like the journey to get there, in a way, even though it kind of really wasn't, but like, it was part of the journey. That it was the thing that helped me get there mentally. It was the thing that helped ease my mind on the path towards where I wanted to really be in life. And I think that's the best way to describe it, and YouTube and just everything. It basically was there for the times when I needed to escape into something else, into something that I inflated the importance of, simply to ease my mental health and to make myself more mentally healthy as a result of it, just to kind of distract me from all the bullshit that I was going through and at the time, and kind of focus on something, because it's a bit like going to the gym, for example. People go to the gym for all kinds of different reasons, but a lot of the reasons are tied to mental health. For me, it's the same thing. It's just, instead of lifting weights, I'm kind of writing reviews and stuff and doing all that. It keeps my mind occupied on something else instead of focusing on like negative stuff and all of that, which nobody wants to go through. And in a way, that's always the best cure for mental health, is to keep your mind occupied on something else. And it's always that thing in the back of your mind subconsciously that it doesn't really matter, that it doesn't really have value, but you kind of have to shut that out sometimes and still do it. And that's why I've done it for so long. That's what's kept me going for these 10 years, until I actually reached a point where I essentially found like contentment in my life. And then it was a case of like, oh, so now I don't need this anymore. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't just want to stop, but I definitely want to slow down with this. And that's kind of how it ended up being what it is today. And that's why my YouTube channel is a mess right now, because of that. It's just like, well, I want to keep doing this shit just simply because, well, I still have a voice and I still want to talk and I still want to broadcast my views. I'm still passionate about this, even though it's not really something that's important. It's just I'm not going to give 100% of my effort to it. But I look back at the past and I just laugh, really, in a way. But at the same time, there are a lot of things I've done that I am still really kind of proud of. Like, I think like the one that I'm most proud of, definitely the Star Ocean 6 review. That's definitely like one of the reviews that I'm most proud of that I did. And that was not a great time of my life when I did that review, but it ended up being one of the better reviews I've done. And the Odin Sphere Lithosphere review, that is another review that I really am fond of, because like I really had a lot to say about that game, both games, because I've reviewed Odin Sphere and Odin Sphere Lithosphere at the same time, and it's also kind of like tied to why I left Destructoid C blogs, and like that was the review that made me leave, because it's and that's the thing, like I still stand by that. Like I got a lot of shit. I got a lot of shit for that review for some reason. Like on the Destructoid community, they really gave me shit for that review and heavily criticized it and said that it was garbage and said that it really sucked. And, to those people that said that, well, I think you're wrong. To this day, even, like, later on in life, I still think that you were all wrong about that. No, I still know you were all wrong about that, because I know just how good that review was and just how much information was there. So I still stand by the fact that ultimately, like, that review was a solid review, I mean, I made that review back in 2017, which, funnily enough, was today. Well, it's 2017 today, so it was an anniversary, like, review in a way. And yeah, and we're in 2025 now, so that's quite a while. Like, that's 8 years ago. Like, 8 years ago, is when I pretty much left the Destructoid C blogs. 8 years ago, and it doesn't exist anymore. You can't actually go and see the Destructoid C blogs. They nuked it, including everybody's work. You can't actually find anybody's work that they slaved away on Destructoid anymore, which is really a shame. And it's kind of sad, because there's some people that did work their ass off making content on there besides me, and I kind of feel bad for them, because they worked their ass off for nothing, just simply for Destructoid to like delete everything, which is bullshit. The only thing that managed to save my content was the Wayback Machine. Thank God for the Wayback Machine, my God. But yeah, like, it really sucks that they took that down. But yeah, that's when I left, and it was all because of the criticism I got for my Odin Sphere Lithosphere review, and that's when I learned that this was not a place for me anymore. Like, these people don't value me, these people don't want me around. If this is what they think of my content, I'm just going to go somewhere else where people will appreciate my content. And I'm so glad I did, because that's when I found you guys who have supported me on YouTube, and you guys have given me the support that I wanted from the start. So the moment that I went on YouTube was the moment that I actually started winning. That's my winning moment. That's when I actually accomplished what I set out to do, to get a small audience that values me for what I do, instead of just like having to like hope and pray that people give a shit. I now have people that do, and I'm so fucking thankful for that. You know, I appreciate every single one of you who shows up for all of my content, be it on YouTube or Cynical Gaming Blog, because it matters to know that there's people out there that are willing to give their time to listen to me go on about all these games and rant and rave and like, you know, talk and gush over all these games. You know, that's important to me, and that's why I do this to begin with. So really, in a way, I have no regrets. Destructoid was a waste of time. The only thing that I got from the Destructoid community blogs was, in a way, it did kind of help sharpen my, like, it was a very harsh landscape, and it did help sharpen my skills a little bit. There were a lot of things that I did learn, mainly from all the other writers that were on there, and I took all of that and I applied it to my content in my own way. But there was a point where I just had to stick up for myself, and I did. You know, and the Odin Sphere Lithosphere review was that moment, and I still look at that review today and think that review was solid. It was a really good review. And, you know, I've done some shit reviews, like when I reviewed Star Ocean 2, that was terrible. You know, there was some really bad reviews I've done, so I'm not trying to toot my own horn when I say this, but it genuinely was a good review, and I know it was a good review. So, you know, I have had other people, like, praise that review outside of Destructoid C-Blogs. It was only the Destructoid C-Blogs that criticised it. And yeah, that's kind of what led my Valve Profile 2 review to be what it was, because a lot of the criticisms of my Odin Sphere Lithosphere review was that it wasn't concise, and it was too bloated apparently. But I disagree with that in retrospect. It had all the information that needed to be there, and a lot of people were saying, well, you know, you repeated yourself. But I'm like, I'm reviewing two different games here. Of course I'm repeating myself, because there's two different like sort of games which have completely different mechanics. So I'm going to bring up the alchemy system twice, obviously. I'm going to bring it up once for the original game, and again for the remake, you know? But people didn't get that, and people just think, you know, oh, well, this was shit because it was too bloated. And I was just like, you know, like, you don't have to read the whole lot, just pick things out that you want to read, you know? I mean, not everybody has to read the whole thing, you know, and that's the silly thing, you know, it's just, I don't understand some people, man. But yeah, like, eventually I carried on, kept making reviews, YouTube kept me going, and yeah, it was going really well, and I've grown as a channel over the course of, like, the years. But obviously, you know, like, it's not really a thing that I'm focused heavily on now. It's just a side gig that I do occasionally, just simply because I still have things that I want to express. I still, like I said before, I'm kind of addicted to YouTube, guys. I'm kind of addicted to content creation, but it's just a part of who I am now. I think that's the thing. It's one of those things where it's hard to let go of, because it's a part of who I am. But I can definitely slow down with it, and that's one thing I definitely want to do, because I don't want to have to, like, make things harder for myself. You know, I want to make things easier for myself, and yeah, like, I do have a strict criteria for the review content that I do, and I like to maintain that. And that's one of the reasons why I don't want to do video reviews anymore, because there's just too much pressure on myself to maintain that standard that I want to have for myself, to keep that consistency. But over the years, as I say, like, I've managed to get a few games reviewed, not as many as I'd like, but I've still managed to get a few games reviewed, and in a way I'm kind of happy that I've made it as far as I have. it would be nice if I could make it further, but you know, it doesn't really like make much of a difference in the grand scheme of things. Ultimately, what matters is that I keep having fun doing this, and I do it in a way that makes it enjoyable for me, and that hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. So yes, thanks for sticking with me this whole time, guys, and if you haven't checked out my blog, I recommend giving it a look. There, at the top of the page, there's kind of like a post carousel which kind of cycles through different posts. A lot of the best posts that I've done that aren't reviews are on there, so check that out if you want to see some of my best posts, and if you want to see the reviews, they're just beneath that, and there's like a list of them. So yeah, other than that, thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to check out my latest review of 7 Blades on Cynical Gaming blog, and I will see you all later.